Okay, so forgiveness. It's one of those things we hear about all the time, right? Like, oh, you should just forgive them, or have you forgiven yourself yet? But honestly, it often feels like we're only kind of scratching the surface. Like, what if forgiveness is about way more than weakness or just saying it's okay? What if it's actually like a superpower for your mental well being?
Yeah.
So, today we're going to really dive deep into how forgiveness and mental health are connected, all based on some really interesting research. And I think whether you're dealing with some past hurts or just want to grow as a person, you'll find some surprisingly helpful stuff here.
I think you're right. The way we usually talk about forgiveness, well, it often misses the mark. There's a ton of confusion about what it actually means.
Okay.
And it's definitely not forgetting what happened, excusing bad behavior, or even making up with the person who hurt you.
Okay, so if it's not about any of that, what is forgiveness really? It sounds kind of mysterious when you put it that way.
Well, forgiveness is about making a choice, a conscious choice, to let go of all the negativity you feel, the anger, the resentment, that desire for revenge. It's not about the other person at all, actually. It's about you freeing yourself from the burden you've been carrying.
Oh, so it's almost like finally setting down this heavy backpack you've been lugging around forever. No wonder it's linked to mental health. Is that where the research comes in?
Exactly. More and more studies are showing that something called forgiveness therapy can really make a difference for people who are struggling with things like anxiety, depression, even PTSD. You see, when we hold on to all that anger and resentment, our brains kind of get stuck in a loop, replaying the hurt again and again. And forgiveness can help us break free from that and rewire those thought patterns.
Whoa, rewiring your brain just from learning to forgive? That's pretty intense. Everyone listening, think about a time when you were holding on to anger or resentment about something. How did it affect you? Like, did it take over your thoughts, drag down your mood? I know I've definitely been there. And those feelings, well, they can really stick around if you don't deal with them.
Absolutely. They could become so ingrained that they actually affect your whole outlook on life. But that's where forgiveness therapy comes in, providing some structure. Though it's not like one size fits all or anything.
Huh.
It starts by really acknowledging the pain, not brushing it aside, but truly digging into those emotions. Then you look at why you haven't forgiven yet. What are the thoughts or beliefs behind that resentment?
Wow, that sounds like some serious inner work. It can't be easy to face all that head on.
It's definitely challenging, but in the end, it can be incredibly freeing. And that leads to the next big step, making the decision, like really deciding to forgive.
Oh, hold on. Even if someone hasn't apologized or said they were wrong, you can still choose to forgive.
Exactly. Remember, this is about your well-being, your freedom from those bad feelings. It's not about saying what the other person did was okay.
You know what? This is making me totally rethink how I've handled things in the past. But what happens after you decide to forgive? Does it just like magically disappear?
Oh, I wish it were that easy.
Yeah.
There's a stage where the real work begins. It's called actively working on forgiveness. And that's where therapists use all sorts of strategies and techniques to help people process their emotions in a healthy way.
Ooh, okay. Like what are some examples? What does actively working on forgiveness actually look like?
Well, one powerful technique uses something called empathetic exercises. It's about actually trying to see things from the offender's perspective. Now, this doesn't excuse their actions at all, but it can help you understand the whole situation better. Maybe even see them as a flawed human being, capable of making mistakes just like you.
I can imagine that one's pretty tough, putting yourself in the shoes of someone who hurt you. Are there any other tools therapists use?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Another super helpful one is journaling. Writing down your thoughts and feelings about the situation lets you process everything safely. You can really dig into your anger, explore where the resentment comes from, and even start noticing any patterns in how you react.
Journaling really, amazing for self-discovery. Okay, so you acknowledge the pain, figure out why you're holding back, decide to forgive, and then actually work on it using these different techniques. What's the last stage in this process? What's the end goal?
The ultimate goal is reaching a point of release where you truly let go of those negative emotions. It's about moving from bitterness and anger to peace and understanding.
That sounds like a great place to be. But is that really possible for everyone? Like, what if the hurt is just really, really deep?
Well, remember, forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. It's rarely smooth sailing. There will be setbacks, times when emotions run high, and you wonder if you're even making progress. It's important to keep that in mind.
So it's more about the process of working towards it than expecting some magical overnight transformation.
Exactly. And you don't have to go through this alone. Therapists can offer incredible guidance and support, helping you navigate those tough emotions and develop some coping strategies.
That's good to know. But I gotta ask, what are some of the biggest roadblocks people hit when they're trying to forgive? Why is it so hard for some people?
There are a few common ones. For some, it might be cultural or religious beliefs that make forgiving certain actions difficult. Others might have experienced some kind of trauma that makes forgiveness feel impossible, especially if the person who hurt them never takes responsibility.
Yeah, that makes sense. Trauma can really change how you see the world and yourself. It can make even thinking about forgiveness feel overwhelming.
Absolutely. And even your personality plays a role. Some people just naturally find it harder to let go of anger or resentment, while others might jump to forgiveness too quickly without really processing what happened. It's a complex process with tons of factors involved.
It really is fascinating how it all ties together. You've made it clear that forgiveness goes way deeper than just saying, it's okay. It's about a fundamental shift in how we think and feel. But we've mainly talked about forgiving others. What about forgiving ourselves? Where does that fit into the mental health picture?
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Self-forgiveness is often overlooked, but it's absolutely crucial for your mental well-being. Sometimes the toughest hurdle isn't forgiving someone else, but forgiving ourselves for our own mistakes, shortcomings, or choices we regret.
Oof. I think we all struggle with being hard on ourselves sometimes. That inner critic can be brutal.
It's incredibly common. But all that self-blame can trap you in this cycle of negativity and prevent you from truly moving forward. It really can. And when we can't forgive ourselves, well, it can really mess with our self-esteem,
Yeah.
and even our ability to have good relationships.
It's kind of like what you were saying before about that heavy backpack, right? Sometimes the heaviest thing we're carrying is all that self-judgment. Like, I remember this one time I totally messed up a big project at work. And even though my boss and everyone on the team were really understanding about it, I couldn't shake this feeling that I'd let them all down. It took a long time, but learning to actually forgive myself for that mistake, well, it was a real turning point. Like, it actually let me move on and grow from the experience.
That's a perfect example of how powerful self-forgiveness can be. And it's not about pretending you didn't do anything wrong. It's about recognizing we're all imperfect and having some compassion for ourselves.
Makes you wonder, right? Like, maybe we don't talk about self-forgiveness enough. It seems like it should be right up there with all the stuff about mindfulness and self-care.
I totally agree. It's super important for both mental and emotional well-being. And it's not just about what's going on inside us either. Research is starting to show a connection between forgiveness and physical health, too.
Wait, really? Forgiveness can affect our bodies. How does that work?
Well, there are studies showing that people who practice forgiveness tend to have lower blood pressure, better sleep, and even a stronger immune system. It seems like when we're always dwelling on negative emotions, our bodies are pumping out stress hormones like cortisol. And over time, that chronic stress, well, it can really do a number on our physical health, increases the risk for all sorts of problems.
So holding on to anger and resentment, it's not just bad for our minds, it can actually make us physically sick. That's wild. I'm really starting to see forgiveness in a whole new way. Like, it's this hidden superpower we all have but don't really use.
It truly is a powerful force.
Yeah.
And the benefits, well, they go way beyond just our own health. Forgiveness can actually have this ripple effect, impacting our relationships, too.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. If you're not constantly carrying around all that anger and resentment, I bet you're a lot easier to get along with, more open to connecting with people.
You got it. Forgiveness can help us break free from all those cycles of conflict and create more harmonious connections. It allows us to come into relationships with more empathy and understanding. And that creates this sense of trust and safety.
It's like forgiveness is contagious, but in a good way. When we choose to forgive, we might actually inspire others to do the same.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. There's definitely something special about setting a good example. When we model forgiveness in our own lives, we're actually contributing to a more compassionate and forgiving culture all around us.
So by working on our own ability to forgive, we could actually be helping to create a more peaceful world. That's a pretty amazing thought. But how do we actually cultivate that kind of widespread forgiveness? Is it like a skill you can learn, something we can teach?
Those are the questions a lot of researchers and therapists are trying to figure out right now. There's a growing interest in developing these forgiveness interventions that could be used in schools, communities, even workplaces.
So maybe someday forgiveness training will be just as normal as learning first aid or how to deal with conflict.
That's a really exciting thought. Imagine a world where people are just more willing to let go of grudges, see things from different points of view, and approach disagreements with empathy.
Wow, that would be incredible. It really shows how forgiveness isn't just about the past, but about building a better future for ourselves and for everyone. But before we get too carried away, I want to bring up something we haven't really touched on yet. We've talked a lot about the good stuff that comes with forgiveness, but are there ever times when it might not be the right thing to do, like when it might not be healthy?
That's a crucial question. You're right. While forgiveness can be incredibly healing, there are definitely situations where it might not be the best or even safe course of action. Like if someone's in an abusive relationship, the most important thing is for them to be safe and get out of that situation. Forgiveness should never, ever come at the expense of someone's well-being or safety.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's not about condoning harmful behavior, it's about finding a way to heal and become whole again.
Exactly. And in cases where there's been some serious trauma, forgiveness might be a long-term goal, something you work towards gradually with the help of a therapist. It's definitely not something to rush or force.
So there's a lot more to forgiveness than meets the eye. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a very personal process that needs to be approached carefully and thoughtfully.
Absolutely. And it's so important to remember that forgiveness is ultimately a choice, a personal one. No one should ever feel pressured to forgive someone before they're ready. It has to come from a genuine place inside.
That's a really important point. Forgiveness isn't about being weak or letting someone off the hook. It's about giving ourselves the power to heal and move on in a way that feels right for us.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that we all have the capacity to hurt and to heal, to hold on and to let go. It's a journey of self-discovery and growth.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I feel like I'm seeing forgiveness in a completely different light, not just as something personal, but as something that can have a ripple effect, impacting our relationships and even the world around us.
It really is a powerful force for positive change. And it all starts with understanding what forgiveness truly is and what it's not about. It's about freeing ourselves from that burden of negativity and choosing a path of peace and understanding.
It's a journey I think we could all benefit from taking. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious. We've talked a lot about forgiving others and the importance of self-forgiveness, but what about actually asking for forgiveness? Where does that fit into all of this?
That's a great question. Asking for forgiveness, it takes a lot of courage and humility too. It means we have to admit that we've hurt someone and truly want their forgiveness.
And even if the other person doesn't actually forgive us, the act of asking can be incredibly healing, both for ourselves and for the relationship.
You're right. It shows that we're willing to take responsibility for what we did and that we want to make things right. It can be a huge step towards rebuilding trust and getting that connection back.
It's like offering an olive branch, a symbol of peace, and a promise to do better. But I can imagine it's really tough to swallow your pride and admit you were wrong.
It definitely requires you to be vulnerable, but that vulnerability can be what leads to profound healing and deeper understanding.
So even though it's not always easy, asking for forgiveness can be really important for healthy relationships and making things right again.
Absolutely. It reminds us that even when there's conflict and hurt, there's always a chance for healing and making things better.
It's amazing to think about how forgiveness can actually lead to all this positive change, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us, too.
It really shows how even when there's been hurt and conflict, there's always that possibility for healing and reconciliation.
This whole deep dive has been a game changer for me, honestly. I feel like I finally get what forgiveness really means. It goes so much deeper than just saying the words, right? It's about making a real internal shift, choosing to let go of all that negativity and embracing like a more positive way of being.
And that shift can have huge effects. It can
Mhm.
really break those chains of resentment and help us heal from past hurts. And ultimately, I think it allows us to build stronger, kinder relationships with others.
It's like forgiveness gives us permission to finally put down all that heavy baggage we've been dragging around, and actually step into a way of living that's lighter, more joyful.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Mm.
And that lightness you're talking about, it can actually spread outwards, creating a more harmonious and loving world for everyone.
It makes me want to go out and practice forgiveness in every single part of my life. Not just for others, but for myself too. We've only just scratched the surface here, but you've given us so much to think about.
It's been a pleasure diving into this with you. And hopefully, our conversation has sparked some curiosity and maybe even a little self-reflection for our listeners out there.
I'm sure it has. This is the kind of deep dive that leaves you wanting to dig deeper, Explore your own experiences with forgiveness. and see how you can actually use these insights in your own life.
And that's what's so incredible about knowledge, right? It empowers us to make conscious choices and create positive change.
For everyone listening, I encourage you to really think about what stood out to you today and consider how you might bring more forgiveness into your own life. Whether it's forgiving someone who's hurt you, forgiving yourself for past mistakes, or even just trying to have a more forgiving attitude towards the world in general, it's a journey, not a destination, and every step we take towards forgiveness is a step towards a brighter future.
And until next time, I hope you're all doing well and that your hearts are full of compassion.